Demon Slayer Infinity Train, or Mugen Train if you're a bastard child of linguistics, is peak Demon Slayer storytelling. This underrated diamond in the rough. Okay, I'm sorry, I can't say that with a straight face. Anyone familiar with this movie knows about the records it shattered upon release. The fact that it came out in 2020, at the height of the pandemic, and still stood on business is no small matter. Screw it, I'm giving in to the demons. Mugen Train is just easier to say. Mugen Train was not a global phenomenon because of its animation, nor was it carried by the Demon Slayer name. Both did play large roles in its success, but the reason it was such a lasting sensation was its mastery of the tenet trinity of anime: music, storytelling, and themes. Don't get me wrong, animation is also critical to an anime's success, obviously. But unless you utterly fail at a basic standard of animation, diminishing returns on visuals make it less impactful on a viewing experience than the Trinity. Mugen Train solidified itself as the pinnacle of Demon Slayer, not because of its Sakuga, but because of its mastery of the Trinity. But I'm not here to talk about the whole movie. I'm here for the flashy fisticuffs that forever feeds my fanatic fawning over feudal fights. I'm here for Akaza versus Rengoku. This fight is, without question, the best fight of Demon Slayer. Yes, better than Hinokami, better than Tengen's Showstopper, certainly better than anything in the Swordsmith Village or Hashira training arcs. Oh, a quick disclaimer, this will not include anything in the Infinity Castle arc, though I'm confident my claim will hold firm. Now, to give this fight the TLC it deserves, my analysis will be divided into 3 sections: the context, the clash, and the conclusion. After that, we'll come back together as a class and discuss what we learned, finding the nicest bow we can to wrap it all up with. There's a lot to get to, so I'll kick things off with welcome to the introduction after the introduction, where I talk about power scaling, pacing, and presentation, all the while pretending that that alliteration was, in fact, intentional. I start with power scaling to briefly revisit what came before Mugen Train. Season 1 did an excellent job building up the heroes and the villains of this story. It took its time establishing the world, its protagonist, a living ball of empathy known as Tanjiro Kamado, and how the two would interact. And while I'm talking about the story introducing the world, I should probably do the same for anyone who hasn't seen the show and is just here for tips on how to write a fight scene or something like that. So, here goes. Demon Slayer, written by Koyoharu Gotoge, is set in Taisho-era Japan in a world much like ours, save one small caveat. After sunset, man-eating demons come out to, well, eat man. And woman. Sometimes exclusively woman. Demons can only be killed by sunlight or decapitation with a metal mine from a very sunny mountain. Wielding weapons made from this exclusive material, the Demon Slayer Corps sets out to rid the world, country, of demons by slaying their source and leader, Muzan Kibutsuji, and his 12 demon moons. These are split into upper and lower moons, the former remaining unchanged for over a century as of the story's onset. But the Corps has its own elite force, the mighty Hashira, masters of their respective breathing techniques, which grant the users physical abilities that allow them to hold their own against the otherwise overwhelming demons. In essence, the story's power system is the logical extreme of how different types of breathing can affect one's performance in real life. Oh, and those flashy effects are just for show. There's no actual elemental manipulation, at least not for the humans. Now, the story only officially introduces its first Kizuki as late as episode 19 of the first season. We actually meet Muzan himself long before any of his lieutenants, another fantastic narrative decision that we do not have the time for. But after we meet and beat Rui, the Kizuki's lower 6, the show ramps up its power scaling by introducing Tanjiro, and us, to the entire Hashira squad. We only meet them briefly, but this is Gotoge's promise that they will be the focus moving forward. This makes us curious about the opposing team, the 12 Kizuki. Well, don't you worry about a thing, because Gotoge is already on it. A few episodes later, we do meet the Kizuki, or the lower moons at least. But it's hard to be too afraid of them, since Rui stood about as much of a chance against a Hashira as Tanjiro did against Rui. So how is Gotoge gonna renew our faith in these lower moons? Simple. She isn't. Muzan massacres every single lower moon but one. along with any hopes that this show's episode count will even approach triple digits. Like the audience, she realizes that they aren't worth the time it takes to give them orders, sparing the only one that might have a chance of lasting longer than Rui did. This is, and I don't say this lightly, the single greatest flex I have seen from a mangaka. This is Gotoge staring her audience in the eyes and slapping them in the face with their own money. This is someone who crafted a reasonable yet ambitious lineup of boss battles to prepare her plucky protagonist for the grand finale, only to say psych and tear half the map to shreds. But with that, the stage is set by Muzan and Gotoge, for us to hop on the Mugen train for the ride of our lives. Little do we realize, Gotoge is about to flip the script. Whereas the last arc introduced Hashiro and killed off Kizuki, Mugen Train was here to introduce Kizuki and, well, I think you know where this is going. Let's talk pacing. Specifically, let's talk about the pacing of this movie. Demon Slayer is, at its core, an action flick. Its primary purpose is to excite the audience with thrill and wonder. To be successful, it needs to keep that in mind at all times. That's one of the things that works so well about the non-Akaza majority of this movie. In under an hour and a half, it executes on 3 climaxes, each building off the last. Frankly, I'm still amazed at how this movie was able to not only fit them all in, but use them to create a snowball effect of hype and catharsis. That brings us to the literal third act, this movie's 4th climax, the introduction of our first upper moon. I'm sure you don't need me to tell you this, but Akaza's entrance is cold. You feel Tanjiro's dread as he sees the upper 3 inscribed on the demon's eyes. When Rengoku barely saves Tanjiro from Akaza's lunge, after a whole movie of watching the Hashira kick names and take ass, it's hard to keep your jaw off the floor. For those learning how to make your villains terrifying, listen up. The way your characters react, guide the audience. Anime often overdoes this by several magnitudes, but it's a powerful tool when used sparingly. Speaking of reactions, Rengoku, the paragon of spirit and positivity, who's had a smile on his face from the moment we meet him, is dead serious for the entire encounter. That's how big of a threat this upper moon is. Akaza makes himself known, and everybody takes note. Ladies and gentleladies, this is presence. This is... Once Rengoku repels Akaza's sucker punch, the fight has begun. The combat itself doesn't commence just yet, but even their conversation carries a tension of clashing blades. Gotoge achieves this with a twofold strategy. First, we just saw how monstrously powerful Akaza is, meaning that any dialogue that occurs is on his terms. But the second is more subtle. This brief interaction between 2 of the strongest warriors in the show is overflowing with thematic substance. Until now, Demon Slayer is focused on telling the story at hand, allowing its themes to develop beneath the surface. There's perseverance against all odds, a theme anybody with half a Hokage is familiar with, but there's also more tender themes like the value of empathy, even towards the irredeemable, or what constitutes a true family bond. My personal favorite, one that is never explicitly addressed, is rebelling against cynicism by showing sympathy and compassion with impartiality. You may want to be seated for this next part. We live in a cynical society. Shocker, I know. Billionaires pulling political strings, systematic repression so rooted in society it gaslights us into thinking it doesn't exist. The ability or unwillingness for powerful leaders to compromise towards world peace, the existence of TikTok, it's like we're addicted to cynicism as a trauma response. As children, we learn that steadfast spirit and trusting our heart will bring about a bright future. But when we reach the world we're ready to change, it kicks us into the mud and laughs at our naivete. We learn that only a guarded heart can endure reality's lashes, when innocence becomes synonymous with ignorance. But sincere shonen like My Hero Academia and Demon Slayer endured. They saw the light of older, more hopeful shonen dwindling, then chose to ignite torches of their own. They set their hearts ablaze, taking inspiration from one of the most beloved shonen heroes this decade, Kyojuro Rengoku. From our first time meeting him to his last stand, he stands firm and refuses to so much as consider Akaza's proposal. What proposal, you ask? To become a Kizuki, so they can spar together and grow stronger for eternity. Eternal life, eternal growth, eternal power. It's In this proposition that Demon Slayer finally brings its central theme to the forefront, that which connects our Demon Slayers to Muzan's ultimate ambitions. This is a story about eternity versus transience. This is a story about legacy. But as I said before, we don't have time for a full Demon Slayer analysis here. If you want that, you know what to do. For now, let's quickly summon this brief interaction. Hey, pick on someone your own size. Slow down, bro. Just clearing the board first. That's a person you just tried to pulverize. All I see is a leaking sack of blood. How dare you? There's nothing wrong with being a sack. But weak sacks belong in the trash. This literal ray of sunshine isn't weak. Like you know what it means to be weak. You'll have to explain it to me. Don't worry. Once I teach you what real strength is, weakness will just be a process of elimination. So you do want to fight? For eternity, as a matter of fact. Nah, if writers didn't have deadlines, they'd never get anything done. If writers lived forever, they'd literally get everything done. Eventually. I don't need eternity to break your century-long kill streak. Well, guess you'll die. Try me. But before we get into that, we need to discuss power fantasies. Specifically, why they so often fall flat. This clash between Akaza and Rengoku highlights the two main motivators for becoming strong, in anime and real life. Akaza seeks power for power's sake. This is the obsession that takes over when self-improvement becomes a malignant cancer, sapping nutrients from the rest of your life. Akaza discarded everything, including an end goal for his growth. No, literally, he wants to grow forever. By definition, that cannot be a means to an end. There is no end. On the other hand, Rengoku wants to become strong so he can protect the weak, so he can serve the weak. It was ingrained in him that one's natural gifts are obligations. They exist to benefit others, never oneself. This is the key distinction between Akaza and Rengoku. Rengoku has a why. Rengoku has something to die for. It's time for the real fight to begin. We'll analyze each phase of this battle, intertwining all three tenets to determine what is so breathtaking about this fight, without once mentioning the ball-busting, soul-searing, gut-gouging, eye-exploding, mind-melting animation! Starting now. Which means it's finally time to discuss the protagonist of this story, the leitmotif. For those unaware, leitmotifs are melodies that range from a handful of notes to several phrases, representing something, someone, or somewhere. In layman terms, leitmotifs are theme songs, though calling them songs is a bit of a stretch. Now, as a note, later in this analysis, I will be referring to instruments as leitmotifs. These are not exactly the same, however, oftentimes, the actual leitmotif themselves are accompanied by specific instruments. So, for example, for Akaza, there's an electric guitar and auto-tuned vocals, as we'll discuss later. This is technically not Akaza's leitmotif, it's not his exact melody, however, these instrumentals represent him. You'll notice they keep popping up when he does, as they signify either his position or his relation to other characters. Now, I am not a musician. I can't even read basic sheet music anymore. This is not an expert analysis, but the simple, albeit meaningful, findings of a fan who wants to share a deeper level of appreciation for a work of art that lives rent-free in his head. As I mentioned before, Akaza's leitmotif centers around an electric guitar and auto-tuned vocals, an uncanny facade of humanity. Familiar, yet unnatural. Meanwhile, Rengoku summons an orchestra of bass and bass, proudly exclaiming his hard work and sincerity to the world. Both are intense yet refined, reflecting the physical and mental strength of the warriors they represent. As they clash, they roar and retreat, building off each other like competing dancers on stage. For a while, neither goes for the killing blow. Any fighter will tell you that the first phase of a fight is about gauging your opponent. How strong are they? How do they fight? How much endurance do they have? How do you prepare? The soundtrack reflects this push and pull perfectly, transitioning from one leitmotif to the other as smoothly as fighters maneuvering the battlefield. They adapt and press on, forcing the other to do the same. Occasionally, things quiet down as the warriors process what they learned, but these respites only last as long as it takes for Rengoku, whose perspective would follow naturally, to adapt and adjust accordingly. The more Rengoku presses, the harder Akaza has to push back. To the Upper Moon, this is a demonstration of the Hashira's insufficiency for the sake of recruitment. He wants to keep Rengoku alive, to see what he's really capable of, and to never give him the upper hand for more than a moment. This interplay is highlighted by the soundtrack's continuous development. Rengoku's theme slowly takes over, but Akaza's keeps popping up and forcing the former's retreat. It's as if Akaza is coaxing Rengoku out, then crushing him with ease before stepping down. Rengoku is clearly fighting harder and keeping Akaza on the ropes, but Akaza is unfazed. The music calls upon the audience to cheer for Rengoku and hints at him steadily gaining the advantage, yet Akaza's synths are never pushed back when they appear, even when Rengoku sends Akaza flying, only to soon be launched away himself. Neither side seems significantly wounded. It truly appears as if this fight will continue on forever. But that very idea sends subliminal alarm signals to the viewer. The very structure of the fight is Akaza's case in point. Rengoku masks his exhaustion well, so we just see two warriors exchanging blows and getting stronger. The very scene Akaza wants to continue for eternity. At this point, most of us aren't consciously aware of this, so its inevitable conclusion remains a formless pit in our stomach that just won't go away. But it'll become more defined with each new blow. After all, Rengoku's endurance is limited, as is Akaza's patience. As the battle enters its final stage, Rengoku's injuries accumulate, a grazing strike to his forehead, a devastating blow that shatters several of his ribs. He tries to block another punch, taking a deflected hit that still crushes his left eye. There's no question. Akaza has the decisive advantage. No, he had it from the very beginning. We were just pretending not to see it. But reality would be ignored no longer, and any lingering doubts are silenced as Akaza's theme takes full... Despite Rengoku losing ground, Akaza's theme doesn't overwhelm him. Instead, the opposite happens. A defiant chorus roars into the scene, harmonizing with the Flame Hashira's orchestra. It even stands its ground whenever Akaza's theme pops up, which we've seen as no small feat. What's going on? Don't the leitmotifs represent who's got the upper hand in this fight? No. We were just led to believe it was. In truth, we were being told what the music represented the whole time. Did you notice how, despite the storyboarding presenting the fight through multiple perspectives, we never hear Akaza's inner monologue? Earlier, I brushed it off as natural that we would follow Rengoku in this battle, but there's nothing natural about it. We're more focused on the animation and direction than whose head we're in, so we assume the fight is meant to be shown without bias. Thus, the music represents both sides equally, and listening to it will help determine who's winning. But if every other parameter is unbiased except for the exclusive inner monologue of one side, then that alone is enough to skew our bias in Rengoku's favor. Which means that the music, the most important influence on the audience, is also from Rengoku's perspective. So let's rewind a moment and watch the soundtrack develop from the beginning, this time through Rengoku's lens. When Akaza appears, Rengoku can plainly see he's a demon, an upper rank at that, yet his form is more human than most. That's why Akaza's leitmotif is initially presented as an electric guitar and a synthetic bass drop. Rengoku doesn't know anything about this demon, other than the duality of his appearance. Akaza's theme continues in a dull rumble while they converse, since Rengoku is appraising his foe while keeping his own cards close to his chest. That is, until he introduces himself.
柱だな。その時練り上げられている。思考の領域に近い。俺は縁柱。煉獄杏寿郎だ。俺は赤座。
The way Akaza's theme drops off a cliff, giving Rengoku's name no backing track, is pure awesomeness. It's also a flex. Rengoku doesn't need the support of the soundtrack as he introduces himself. His name is the music. Once he's played his first card, though, his theme fills the space, taking and holding center stage, while Akaza's leitmotif resumes in the background. Even as Akaza introduces himself, Rengoku's theme continues uninterrupted. So when does Akaza's theme adopt the iconic vocals that haunt my dreams to this day? Appropriately, it's when Akaza reveals just how out of this world he is.
破壊殺羅針
We've never seen anything like this before, or since, from anyone but Akaza. This is new, alien. Infinity Castle actually supports this. An attentive ear will notice that the electric guitar and signature melody announcing Akaza's return aren't accompanied by those iconic synthetic vocals. Even after he uses his technique development, Tanjiro is still able to hold his own since he's largely familiar with how Akaza fights, and he's much stronger now. But as the fight develops, Tanjiro realizes there's even more to the upper rank than meets the eye. It's at this moment that those synthetic vocals return, the same vocalist singing a new melody. But coming back to Mugen Train, it's no wonder Rengoku is so cautious and reserved at first, as his theme only occasionally swells before pulling back. As the fight progresses, Rengoku pushes more and more until their themes intertwine at almost equal levels. That brings us to the third stage, when Rengoku's theme finds its own voice, dominates the scene. The chorus enters as Rengoku is dealt a devastating blow to his ribs. This cripples his breathing, and is thus the climax of the fight, the moment the outcome becomes inevitable. But Rengoku rages on, summoning a deafening chorus to drown out the pain and fight on. His adrenaline-fueled hysterical strength defies the inevitable, ever-present threat of Akaza's theme. Notice how Rengoku's theme is in full force from here until the battle's end. Akaza's synths do take over during this climactic swell, but like the legend himself, Rengoku's theme rages on. The chorus is Rengoku's adrenaline, his determination to hold his ground and protect those who are counting on him. Ladies and gentlemen, this is thematic mastery. This is musical brilliance, why this fight is so unforgettable despite the show's reputation for show-stopping climaxes. Granted, those have incredible music too, but this is more than incredible, this is breathtaking. Golshina weaves music, storytelling, and thematic evolution into a tapestry of shonen greatness, and we aren't even done yet. Because while this fight is a climax in and of itself, all good fights have climaxes of their own. Thus, when the fighting stops and the rising action reaches a fever pitch, we arrive at the climax to this unprecedented encounter begins quietly, almost unsettlingly so. Both warriors unleashed one of their strongest moves, but while Rengoku was the one who got a hit in, it was about as effective as every other slash. But rather than take a moment to pivot or continue the fight, they both just stand there. Our perspective shifts to Tanjiro, who watches on in despair as reality sets in. Because while neither fighter is moving or saying a word, they are on the exact same wavelength. They both understand that this battle's victor has been decided. That it had always been decided. Akaza speaks softly but firmly. He urges Rengoku to accept his offer so they can keep fighting. He reminds Rengoku of his numerous crippling injuries, while Akaza is no worse off than when he arrived. If Rengoku agreed to become a demon, he too could brush off such mortal wounds. Rengoku doesn't say a word. It's not that he has nothing to say, nor his injuries preventing him from responding. The truth is much, much simpler. So simple that the show doesn't even bother saying it explicitly. While watching this scene, many people were scared and confused as to why Rengoku had stopped. They saw the blood dripping down to his feet, noticed the shaky grip on his sword, and frantically searched for a fatal injury that was causing the Hashira to pause. Some even braced for the anime cliche of a delayed reaction where the fighter collapses with a gasp, blood gushing from a wound inflicted moments ago. To their credit, Rengoku is more than wounded enough to justify collapsing, but there's no dramatic pause before a fall. There's nothing aside from his gasp for air and the trembling of his sword. Kyojuro Rengoku, the flame Hashira, is out of breath. In a show where the primary power system is breathing techniques, this is quite the problem, obviously. But a lot of people miss the sobering humanity inherent in someone who can do nothing but gasp for air. We grow so used to larger-than-life heroes and their grand exploits that we overlook the little things that make them human. But a master swordsman is no more immune to exhaustion than the part-timer spending half their life on a couch. They may take longer to reach that point, they may recover from it quicker, but exhaustion is inherent to the human condition. But then... This is the one time during the Upper Moon encounter that Rengoku finds his smile. But it isn't triumphant or arrogant, nor is it the result of some delirious high. This smile, which only lasts a moment, is Rengoku's expression of ultimate defiance. This is his response to Akaza's condescension, not in words, but action. This is Rengoku accepting his fate. As he summons the last of his strength, Rengoku makes 3 declarations. To Akaza, he reiterates his pledge. To himself, he utters a command. To the world, he proclaims his identity. Then he lunges at Akaza, who receives him head-on, resulting in one final clash where... If you've made it this far, you probably know how this turns out. Despite his breathtaking display of might and agility, Rengoku is impaled through the torso. Akaza pleads for the Hashira to become a demon before he succumbs to his wounds. Rengoku remembers a moment from his childhood when he had one of his last conversations with his mother. She told him that his God-given strength was an obligation to those without his gifts, a duty to protect those weaker than himself. It must never be used for personal gain. Those words are what came to define the brilliant warrior we came to love and root for in less than 2 hours. They are why he never wavered in his response to Akaza, why he found his smile in the face of certain death. They are why, with no breathing techniques left and any hope of defeating Akaza dashed, Rengoku was able to summon his remaining strength and... I have no words to describe how powerful this scene is. Rengoku's final stand is a testament to the human will and the ultimate rebuttal to how Akaza views strength. Because as strong as the demon is, as promising as eternal training sounds, Rengoku is at his strongest when he stands at death's door, defiantly refusing to let another person past. The brighter the flame, the sooner it burns out, and this flame is blinding. In this final clash between desperate beasts, Rengoku overpowers Akaza 3 distinct times. He summons enough force to pierce the demon's neck, despite lacking the strength to even use Flame Breath, stops Akaza's Hail Mary headshot in its tracks, and literally flexes on the upper rank by refusing to let him pull his arm out of the Hashira's torso. As sunlight breaks over the horizon, Akaza's awe quickly turns to panic. Whether he planned this from the beginning or not, Rengoku has Akaza right where he wants him. Both warriors, ensnared in their opponent's checkmate, scream. One frantically tries to escape before the dawn, while the other is intent on bringing them both to the grave. Our heroes try their best to help finish Akaza off, but the demon's desperation overcomes his physical limitations as he tears his own arms off to finally break free. Seeing how close the sun is to rising, Akaza regenerates his arms immediately, of course, before darting into the forest to find refuge from the sunlight. There are other notable events in this falling action, but you probably aren't here for a play-by-play. Watch the movie yourself if you want to see how it resolves. And if you've seen it already, watch it again. Trust me, you won't be disappointed. As for my analysis, Tanjiro says it better than I ever could, so I'll let him end this section.
お前なんかより煉獄さんの方がずっとすごいんだ強いんだ煉獄さんは負けてない誰も死なせなかった戦い抜いた守り抜いたお前の負けだ煉獄さんの勝ちだ
Mugen Train is incredible. Demon Slayer as a whole is pretty amazing, even if it does have more flaws than Akaza's Become a Demon pitch, but I'll get to those in later videos. For now, I want to focus on why we're here, why Akaza vs. Rengoku lives rent-free in my head, half a decade after I first saw it. Now that Infinity Castle Part 1 is out, I'll admit that the title for Best Fight of Demon Slayer is in contention. Honestly, it figures that the first fight to try and dethrone Akaza's first encounter would be his last. The final battle against Akaza is magnitudes more impressive in animation, choreography, storyboarding, and just about every other measurable metric. The thematic development and storytelling are also top-notch, smashing through the impossibly high bar Mugen Train had set for it. Yet I can't confidently say that that fight was better than this one, nor can I explain precisely why I feel that way. I'm sure I'm in the minority here, and in time, my opinion may realign with the majority. But right now, considering the context and execution of both battles, I have to give Rengoku the dub. His fight is brutally efficient, ruthlessly effective, and unmistakably impactful. Infinity Castle made me shed genuine tears, a feat Mugen Train only accomplished upon further reflection and rewatching. But the latter marked a turning point in the story, performing its assigned role with masterful precision. As a writer, I've learned more from Akaza vs. Rengoku than from the rest of Demon Slayer combined, and I can't just write that off. I mentioned that Mugen Train did make me cry, just not on the first watch. I'll preface this with an admission. I am a fundamentally empathetic and sensitive person who easily gets overcome with emotion, especially when watching anime, but I rarely cry from it. There may have been a time when I cried much easier, but something has to deeply resonate with me now to draw out any real tears. Frankly, I'm still trying to figure out what it was about Infinity Castle that did the trick. For Mugen Train, I know exactly what it was that made me cry. It wasn't that I was sad to see a beloved character die, or that I was just overwhelmed by the unfairness of it all. What broke me was Rengoku's advice to Tanjiro, kneeling in a pool of his own blood.
己の弱さや不甲斐なさにどれだけ打ちのめされようと心を燃やせ歯を食いしばって前を向け君が足を止めてうずくまっても時間の流れは止まってくれない共に寄り添って悲しんではくれない
I went to some dark places during my service, places I can't and shouldn't mention on YouTube, at least not on a anime fight scene analysis video. But it was in that darkness and in the years since where the phrase "set your heart ablaze" was ingrained in my soul. Hopeful platitudes are a dime a dozen, but something about those 4 words struck a chord in me like nothing else did. I think it's the powerful imagery embedded in its simplicity. When depression leaves you unable to move or do what you want, the idea of igniting your cold heart to press forward is a silent promise that something so simple is enough to get you through the day. That something so simple is enough. So, why does this fight live rent-free in my head? Well, it's because of everyone involved in creating this masterpiece. The storyboarders, the writers, the directors, the animators, the musicians, the editors, the composers, the artists, the designers, the producers, the managers, the voice actors, the technicians, and so many more. It's because of Gotoge, who put her heart and soul into sharing the story with us. It's because of the audience who responded to everyone's hard work with glowing praise and rivers of tears. It's because of my own life and every experience that led me to resonate with this movie as much as I did. It's because of Rengoku, the legacy he left behind. A legacy that I and many of you must now carry on with our own stories, our own lives. Everything he stood for are guideposts for the future. Whether you're writing a hero's journey or setting your own heart ablaze, Rengoku has set a shining example. I fall into both camps, so maybe it's no wonder I love this fight as much as I do. Yeah, it's no wonder. After all, what is a story if not what it makes you feel? So yeah, I love this fight. And I hope you do, too. Thanks for watching. Thank you for watching my video. It was a lot longer of a process than I thought it would be, but it was so much fun, so I don't regret it at all. However, if you did enjoy it, it would mean the world to me if you just like it and share it with people you think would enjoy it. As for the next topic of my next video essay, I'd like to hear your thoughts, actually. I think I'm going to keep doing Demon Slayer for a little while. There's a lot that I think I could do better, but I think that's why I'm so fascinated with it and why I want to make videos on it. I think shows that are stories that are really good, but could be so much better, are the most interesting shows to analyze. Because, like I said in my conclusion, it's kind of up to us, writers, to really carry on the legacy of these stories and with our own stories. And I think breaking them down is the best way I can do that and help other people do it as well. There's a lot more I could have added in here. I basically didn't mention Tanjiro at all. His leitmotif is also very ever-present throughout kind of this encounter. There's also Dies Irae, the leitmotif of death, as you may or may not know it as. Look it up if you want to, but it plays right before Rengoku uses his ninth form. Golashina, the composer, just really went all out with the soundtrack for the whole show, but this fight in particular, and it's incredible. I really encourage you to look it up yourself. But there's also leitmotifs for gratitude. There's obviously the demon ones. There's too much to cover in a video that's of a reasonable length. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you'd like to see next, and I will see you in the next one. Vocals do the thing. Billionaires pulling political strings. Systematic oppression so rooted in society. It gaslights us as in. The climax to this unprecedented. Great start. Akaza uses a electric guitar as well. But right now, considering the context and speaking of reactions,